welcome to today's Way Forward Workshop Leader Lunch Break, where we are pleased to welcome Yvette Ittu to the conversation. 10 years ago, the headline of a Cleveland.com article in the business section proclaimed, Yvette Ittu of Cleveland Development Advisors has one of the coolest jobs around. That still remains the case, although you may not be aware of all the change that she has driven. For almost 23 years, she has served as president and CEO of Cleveland Development Advisors, while simultaneously serving as executive vice president of finance and operations of the Greater Cleveland Partnership. Yes, her days are quite full. Her legal and financial training and experience as finance director for the city of Lakewood and attorney at Calfee, Halter, and Griswold equipped her to lead Cleveland Development Advisors, or CDA, with a portfolio that now exceeds $475 million of investments in more than 160 projects, and which has leveraged $3 billion in additional, almost $3 billion in additional public and private sector investments. Her fingerprints can be found on multiple impactful projects in the city. It's her catalytic real estate development that has supported neighborhood development, job creation and retention, business attraction and expansion, and quite honestly, just drives a higher quality of life for all of us who call Greater Cleveland home. She's a Cleveland native who knows and loves the city she serves. And in addition to all of that, she finds time to give back through service on multiple community and nonprofit boards, including Digital C, Canalway Partners, Benjamin Rose Institute, Village Capital Corporation. She serves as board president of New Market Tax Credits Coalition, as well as audit and financial advisory committees for several local governments. And when she's not sitting on one of these boards or changing the face of Cleveland, you can find her rowing on the Cuyahoga River. Welcome, Yvette.
Wow, thank you, Marianne. That was incredible. Let's see if with all of that I can actually share my screen with you all, so you can see some fun pictures as opposed to my face. So somebody give me the thumbs up if you can see. Yes, thumbs up. Excellent. Okay. Well, again, Marianne, thank you so much. That's an amazing. I didn't know you found all that information, but as I was listening to it, I was thinking, wow, 10 years ago that article came out, and we're already another $1 billion of development that's happened since then. So good to hear. Good to hear that background. So again, thanks Marianne for that introduction, and just want to share a little bit about who Cleveland Development Advisors is and our affiliation to the Greater Cleveland Partnership. So for those of you on the line, I got a list of names, but for those of you who may not be so familiar with the Greater Cleveland Partnership, it's basically one of the largest chambers in the country with over 12,000 members. GCP focuses on supporting and building dynamic businesses. And dynamic businesses, as we all know, need abundant talent and inclusive growth. And also dynamic businesses want to be in an appealing community, a place where their businesses can grow and where their talent actually wants to be. So I believe that was the actual impetus for Cleveland Development Advisors when it was created more than 30 years ago. The mission of the Cleveland Development Advisors is just this: to invest private capital in catalytic real estate projects for the betterment of Cleveland and the region. And CDA capitalized its first fund over 30 years ago, and I really believe that CDA has stayed true to its mission for those 30 years. So I just want to pause for a moment and just share that we have an absolutely amazing team here at CDA. I think we have a few board members who might be on the line, but we have a great small but mighty team that works on all of these investments that we make. We have an amazing board of directors that manages our fiduciary obligations of the board, but we have an equally amazing community advisory committee that helps us to think through the strategies that we make in our investments, how we make our investments, and where we make them. And then I couldn't go further if I didn't point out that we have an amazing group of corporate and bank and philanthropic leaders in this community that actually make these investments in CDA capitalized funds to make what we do happen. So just by way of a quick little snapshot of CDA, I'm going to just go through a little bit of history so you have some perspective. Marianne gave a little bit of this perspective, but to date, we've capitalized over $400 million in capital from investors. We've turned over several of those funds. So we've actually put out about $500 million in about 170 projects that has leveraged over $4.2 billion. Just if I want to take you through a little bit of the history of CDAs and its investments, because again, we've been around for 30 years, how it started and sort of how we've evolved over the 30 years. So initially, one of the very first investments that CDA made was to help to acquire the 28 acres that Gateway was built on, one of the very first investments. From then, making investments in other stadiums, attractions, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, hotels, hospitality. Also, during that time, we were making investments in intermediaries, other organizations that could make investments in the neighborhoods of Cleveland. Village Capital, Shore Bank were some of the examples. But we were also making investments in the neighborhoods. Again, you go back to that theme of catalytic investment, or those investments that you can make in a neighborhood that are going to have an impact on the entire neighborhood. So a lot of investments that were made were around retail. So you see Shaker Square, Lee Harvard, Brooklyn Center, Church Square, made some investments in some business development. You see this building as you driving downtown is helping to bring more jobs back into the city. And then this focus became about how do we, as a business community, attract more talent here to Cleveland. So we actually created a fund that would invest specifically in downtown housing. First started out with looking at some of the warehouse district projects, and then continuing to invest. We've in fact, over the time that CDA's been investing in real estate, have repurposed more than 5 million square feet of vacant space. So if you can imagine that, if you've been from Cleveland and if you ever walked down, 10, 15, 20 years ago, walking down, some of the streets of Cleveland, a lot of vacant buildings. We've been very fortunate to be able to have those buildings be repurposed. We still have some challenges today, given the current market. But we really took charge as a community to think through how could we collectively repurpose these buildings for the use that we needed. East 4th Street. This is Ari Marin. I said this one day that CDA, thank goodness for CDA, was their bank because the types of investments that were being made in downtown, these investments were not quite bankable. So what that means is a developer couldn't go to a bank and say, hey, I want to redevelop East 4th Street. The numbers just did not work in a capital stack. So you need additional resources, you need additional incentives to come to the table. And there's a number of different ways, tax incentives and tax abatements, et cetera, that can be made. But there's generally always another gap in certain projects in Cleveland, and resources like CDA can provide those gaps to fill those. We started doing some for sale housing right before the recession. We started to get some traction there. Hopefully we can get that back. That's one of our goals going forward. But Flatsey's Bank was also one of our signature projects. In fact, we helped the Wolstein group acquire the property that the Flatsey's Bank was ultimately built on. Our focus has been, you can go to our website and look at our map. We're pretty transparent on all the investments that we make. So you can see on a map where they're made, how they're made. We make a lot of investments along major corridors, invest throughout the city and in various neighborhoods, but you'll see a lot in downtown and along the major corridors. Again, continued the repurposing of vacant buildings like the 9 Metropolitan. That's the standard building that you see. We we're able to start to attract a federal tax credit called New Markets Tax Credit, which enabled us to bring more private capital into Cleveland, into ways that supported our community and our neighborhoods more. And so we were looking at a number of different ways that we can strategically invest those dollars. And as we looked at strategy, we looked at what is the highest benefit to to our residents? What are we jobs, services, some of the social services, some of the education and workforce that has been created over the past couple of years. And then most recently, we've been, as you can see, if you look at our map, we've been developing in neighborhoods, but more recently we've been getting a little bit more intentional about how we invest in neighborhoods and being a little bit more proactive. Historically, we made sure we had a capital stack all lined up for most of our projects. That there are only a very few exceptions where we got in on the ground level to actually help with the acquisition of certain projects. We're starting to think more about that now. How can we be more proactive with developers to help them, developers and sponsors of project, to be able to acquire the property that they're going to develop before the price gets jacked up. So we're thinking about that a little bit more as we go forward. And then as we had a retreat a few weeks back, and again, I know I have some board members that are probably out there, and some of the themes that were emerging about, okay, our board always says, that's great, we're gonna do what we're doing, and we're gonna continue doing more things. So we really stayed true to our mission, but we've tried to expand what we're doing. I just mentioned some ways that we're looking to do that more in the neighborhoods, but these are the themes that sort of popped up. Think about the mayor's 15-minute city, what makes up a 15-minute city, being able to walk or take public transportation to things like a grocery store, your school, a park, etc. The lakefront, there's a lot of discussion around the lakefront and the riverfront and a lot of the infrastructure that needs to take place, but post the infrastructure will come real estate development. We want to be ready for that when that comes. When we look at how we invest our new markets and our strategy around investing in new markets, we're looking at what are those projects that will create jobs and create jobs in neighborhoods that'll bring jobs back into the city. And then equitable development. We want to make sure, as we're looking at the development that's happening, who's actually benefiting by that development, not just the development itself, but who's actually participating in that development. So we're looking at that more carefully as well. Just for some fun visuals, just to kind of show you what the 28 acres of Gateway looked like before it was developed and where we are today. When we make investments at CDA, our board is generally asked, okay, why are we making this investment? We've sort of broken it down into three areas: as a catalytic, strategic, or transformational. And what impact will that project actually have on the residents of our community? So when we think of transformational, that's one of those projects. Kind of, it when you see it, because it's made a huge impact to the area immediately. That will also be catalytic because it'll help more development, but it's an immediate impact. Some other examples, again, East 4th Street. Well, that was basically a 10-year labor of love for the Marin family to rebuild 4th Street. It made an impact on that area for transformational. Some of the lakefront projects, so we consider these transformational and catalytic, because while we made some investments in things like some residential and Nuevo that's down there, there's still a lot of opportunity, and you're seeing the master plans now for future opportunity. So both transformational and catalytic. Just some fun before and after pictures of some of our catalytic projects, like the transformation of the St. Luke's, which included the intergenerational school. Fairmont Creamery, if any of you have ever heard of Sustainable Associates, this development group that came to Cleveland, we call them the kids from Oberlin, but this development group that came to Cleveland about 10, 12 years ago, looking to repurpose this old warehouse, this old creamery, in an area of between Tremont and Ohio City that was really if you look at it, one of the most distressed areas of the city. People think of Ohio City and Tremont and think, well, those are a pretty market rate. In this particular area, one of the most distressed census tracts in our city. So this developer came in and took this on, and if you're familiar with what's transpired in that area since, this developer's also taken on 3. I think they're working on their 4th project in that area, the Awning, Tappan, Lincoln. So they've actually helped to really not only have a catalytic effect, but also a transformational effect. The Capitol Theater is an example of investment that we made, again, to be catalytic for the neighborhood. And if you take that a little bit further and think about the, if you think about, again, what we mean by catalytic, making those, 1 or 2 investments in the neighborhood, and then letting the private market take on. We've created a market in an area where there may not have been a market for housing or retail or whatever it is. We've created that market, and you can start to see the market take over. And then we're saying, okay, that's great. Let's private market take on that and continue on. Let's focus on those next neighborhoods. What are those next opportunity neighborhoods of investment? So for us, there's a number of neighborhoods that we're working on. There's not a particular focus. We have about 40 to 50 projects on our pipeline, and they're not all in a few neighborhoods or across the city. But some examples are Clark Fulton, for example, moving into the Clark Fulton or the Glenville and Puff neighborhoods. So in Clark Fulton, for example, helping the Hispanic Business Center acquire the property that they're building Central Via on. If they didn't acquire that property 4 years ago when they did, it would probably be double the price. So they're able to get to a closing quicker. I think they're breaking ground this week on Central Via. So we're really excited about that. We see more momentum in that neighborhood. Same with Glenville. One of the things that we have learned, or I've learned over the years, is if you're listening to what I'm saying we do, we have primarily finance projects. But we know that there's a whole process to development, all the way from a vision that a developer has, an idea, a passion, a vision to get their project done. Then they have to get to their capital stack. Then they have to build it, and then it has to be sustainable. We come in sort of in the middle of it. We come in when a developer has an idea, has a vision, they get to a certain point, and they're pretty close, or we help them to get there, like we did with, we just mentioned with Central Via, but there's more to the process. And so if you make some missteps at the beginning of the process, it makes it much more difficult to get to the ending stages of it. So what we want to do is be more proactive with developers and more emerging developers, and particularly emerging developers of color in our community, and help them think through the vision that they have of the project to get through to the funding stage to a sustainable project. So our in partnership with Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, we have pulled together what we're calling this Equitable Development Ecosystem Collaborative, because as I just mentioned, we're just one spoke in the wheel. We provide the funding, but there's so many more other aspects that a developer needs to focus and tackle to get their project complete. And so a couple of things that we're doing, that we're focusing in on, is education and technical assistance. But we're not just doing it standalone. Like, you're not just going to taking a course in development. This is meant for emerging developers who have a project that they're working on, and we'll be working with a team of mentors, and also have interaction with funders who have the ability to fund their projects. And so we are so excited to be kicking off this fall. We will be kicking off in October a cohort of 15 participants that will be taking a 8-month program that we really hope that when we get to the end of the program, that we have more than half of those participants get funding. And that might sound like a low number, but we've looked across the country and we've seen similar programs where maybe 1 or 2 out of 30 get funded. We're structuring this a bit differently. We've brought in some national partners who do this across the country, but we're putting a little Cleveland spin on it. So we're excited about that, and I hope you guys will watch out for that as we go forward. I probably went on way too long, but that those are some things that I just hope that you guys got some interest out of. I will stop sharing my screen in case you guys have some questions.
Yeah, Yvette, thank you so much. Let's start with just kind of learning a little bit more about the process of investing. How do prospective projects come to CDA?
Yeah, so very good question. Because when we first started, we were sort of a bit of a stealth organization, right? It was making investments in those projects that, were deemed to be catalytic, right? And so, when I first started 20 plus years ago, it was a different board, and it was a good board, but a different philosophy of, we'll kind of know it when we see it, kind of philosophy. And today that's shifted. What catalytic means has shifted quite a bit for us. What catalytic to us means having a project that might be the first of its kind in a particular neighborhood. So we are out working with our partners across the city, Student Neighborhood Progress, all of our CDC partners, the city of Cleveland. We work with everyone in the ecosystem. That goes back to that ecosystem collaborative that I talked about. No one can do this in a vacuum. So you really need to be working with partners who are on the ground, who understand what's in the market. I also mentioned that we do have a fabulous community advisory committee who also is on the ground and understands what's happening in the market, and will provide us some leads, etc. Good question.
Speaking of the city, so how is that relationship working with the city and the county and the development plans that they also have in the works?
Yeah, we're in a whole new world now, and it's really exciting. Because one of the first things that we always ask ourselves as we're looking at an investment is it part of a community plan? And for several years, it's been hard to sort of like find that written community plan, like a written plan that a CDC might have. Sometimes CDCs have plans, sometimes they don't. Sometimes the city has a global vision on things, or city or county. But what we're starting to see now is more definition around those plans. So when you think about the mayor's 15-minute city, what does that mean? And focus on particular neighborhoods, and the way things are being structured in terms of tax abatement around neighborhoods that are either market neighborhoods, middle neighborhoods, or opportunity neighborhoods. The vision's a little more, it's becoming a little bit more clear, and the plans are becoming a little bit more clear. So it's easier for not only us, but everyone who's in the market. We also, GCP has a website that you can actually go on the site and see all the plans that are out there right now. So they'll show some of the the projects that have just recently been completed, but it also shows those that are just starting construction, in construction, or have a plan. And so it's a really cool site. We're going to build it out further. Right now it's downtown, near downtown, through Midtown in Ohio City, but we really like to see that for the entire city.
One of the kind of biggest topics of conversation when it comes to development is really connecting the lakefront to the city. How might CDA be involved in that work?
Yeah, so when you think about CDA in our history and what we do, just to be clear, is we take private capital and we invest it in real estate projects, not infrastructure projects, but real estate projects. And there's a difference. And real estate can be either nonprofit, could be a nonprofit sponsor, or it could be a for-profit sponsor. But when you talk about things like the connectivity of the lakefront, or things like Irishtown Bend, that are like projects that absolutely need to happen. Cheers, the Lakefront, those are infrastructure projects. The funding for those projects come from a number of various sources. Where CDA would come in is the investment of real estate around those infrastructure projects. So you think about think about Opportunity Corridor as an infrastructure project. Now that the corridor is complete, there's property along the corridor that is prime for development. That's where an entity like CDA can come in and work with the developer to develop those parcels.
In talking about the ecosystem and the partners that you're working with, how much in the process that you go through are you thinking about what happens after the development? So job creation, sustaining the businesses that are going to be coming into these spaces.
Yeah, that's twofold and extremely important. So one of the things that we look at when we're making an investment, especially an investment of equity and grant-like equity that we're able to create through tax credits, because we also draw down tax credits from the federal government. Those are limited resources, and we want to use those in a way that the businesses that we're investing in are meeting a specific mission. Sometimes that mission is, for example, for investing in a food bank, the mission is the fact that they're providing the service for the community of the food bank, or Providence House, investing in Providence House, a nice crisis nursery in Buckeye. Sometimes the investment itself is the investment for the community. Other times we look at it to say if it's a business development investment, we're looking at what are the jobs that are being created. Are they jobs that are being created for the community? Are they accessible jobs? Are they jobs that have benefits? Are they jobs that have workforce training associated with them? So we ask all those questions when we're looking to make an investment of funding that is actually more on the equity side. You asked a question about, and because it was a twofold question, because you also asked, well, and it's when developers develop a real estate project that they have tenants in. So we also want to know who are those tenants, how are those tenants benefiting the community. So that's also important, but it's also important for that developer to have a tenant base that's going to continue to make that real estate project successful. So it's multi-phase question you had there. I want to make sure I answered it all.
Are there other cities or areas that you look to who's doing this really well that you want to bring ideas back to Cleveland?
You know what, we're doing it all the time. We have a network of CDA is a pretty unique organization in and of itself. I think we were probably one of the first of its kind when it was created. There were other communities who came to us at the time to say, how are you guys doing this? How did you convince your corporate and bank community to invest dollars with you in an investment fund where they're it's more of a civic fund where they're getting little. We're investing in what's considered a mezzanine position in a capital stack, which is a pretty high risk. Typically higher returns if you're in the private market, but we're investing in that mezzanine rate at a lower cost patient capital. So our investors don't get a lot of return. They're doing it for the benefit of the community. So when this first started, this was very novel, and we helped other organizations like in Detroit and other communities understand how we did it, and they've mirrored that. But we've also become a certified development entity, which helps us to bring the Marcus tax credits to the community. We've also become a CDFI, which is Certified Development Financial Institution, which helps to bring funding from the federal government here. And there's a network of those organizations that are out there, CDEs and CDFIs, and we often share ideas of what are best practices and who's doing what. And trust me, if there's somebody doing something, better than we are, I love to hear their ideas and And we love sharing our ideas with them as well. One of the things that we are recently doing again is we're bringing in a national partner, Capital Impact Partners, who has done this equitable development initiative training in Detroit, DC, Dallas, San Francisco, and we're bringing them here to Cleveland because they have succeeded in doing some of this in other markets.
Yvette, hard to believe, but we have run out of time. This has just been such a wonderful sharing of information. I know there are some questions that we did not get to that Rachel received and that are in the chat, so we'll send those your way if you could be so kind as to respond.